welcome to How to Win the Lottery Season 12 Author Interview. I'm Jerry Lewandowski.
Hi, I'm Shreds.
There you go. We are here with the author we have been reading all module long, all season long, Blake Butler. Hello, Blake.
Hey, what's up?
I want to say right off the bat, because we have gotten yelled, there's such irony with this. This interview will contain spoilers for as much as I think you can spoil your books, which I think are maybe possibly unspoilable, possibly. If you, like, we've gotten yelled at so many times on YouTube specifically, or they're like, I was listening to this interview while reading the book and you didn't tell me there was going to be spoilers. It's like, well, why are you listening to an hour-long interview with an author of a book you're currently reading about that book? Like, just finish the book.
Yeah.
So if you're like reading Void Corp or you're reading UXA or something and you have not finished it yet and you want to have that preserved for you, finish those and then come back. But thank you for being here at all. And thank you, Blake, for being here too.
I think any spoilers would only make the soup even more messy. So
well, yeah, I also don't think you're the kind of author who would ever explain what your books are about.
Yeah.
So, which I'm glad about.
Yeah, they're books that are specifically resistant to spoiler because they don't rely on like twists and turns or like plot revelations or things like that. So right. Yeah, I'm not. The spoiler stuff is. I don't worry about that. When do you? This is more a general question about your reading habits. But when you read, do you read for things like plot and character, or are you mostly like focused on things like language?
I mean, sometimes plots are awesome, but if the plot is the only thing, then it's like, I think it's really hard to write a plot that is interesting by itself, especially if you've read a lot of books, you know? So like, I think plot is one tool among like many, many, many hundreds of tools that just for some reason takes the front seat all the time because people are used to consuming that way. But like, yeah, I like plot as much as I like voice or, you know, any of the little nuggets you can come up with to process things.
Yeah, I feel like when I think of plot, I mostly think of like the crime novels that I really love. That like they have like kind of a you know, there's like a machinery to it that is identifiable, and part of the fun is like figuring out the structure and the scaffolding and figuring out what's going to happen next. Whereas like I feel like we get a completely different pleasure from your kind of book, which to me seems much more focused on language and like is vibe an unfair way to put it? Does that feel?
Yeah. Mood is maybe the boomer version of vibe, and I'm
sure.
in the mood. So
how has the double book launch gone? Because I don't know that I've ever heard of. I mean, I feel like, you know, I'm more versed in movies than books, where it's like, well, we shot 2 films back to back and we're releasing them 6 months apart or whatever. But like, I'm sure it's happened, but like, I don't know too many times where like an author's like, here's 2 books for you to read. So how has the double launch of Void Corp and UXA gone for you?
Yeah, it's weird because they're both books that I wrote a long time ago, sort of. I mean, I was working on UXA up in bits and pieces up to 2024, but most of all of that stuff was written a long time ago, or and the idea was certainly a long time ago. So it's been like weird. Like I usually don't care at all about when books come out. I'm not like that attached to the marketplace part of writing. So. But emotionally, it's been really weird because I'm like very vividly aware, I guess, of some of the elements of like Void Corporation in particular, where it's like I couldn't, if you had asked me to spoil Void Corporation when it came out in 2020 or even the years before that, I wouldn't have been able to decode any of it. And now with some distance from my old self, I'm like, oh my God, I like sort of see what I was doing, and it's horrifying.
Well, what we liked about, and we talked about in the Void Corporation episode, was how in your foreword to that book, you're basically just like, hey, good luck. Just like, kind of just like, you know, like, here's kind of like what I thought about and what I was thinking about and how I approach this, but like, you know, good luck while reading it, which, you know, is both cool and also intimidating as hell when you're about to dive into, you know, a 300-page book.
Well, also by that token, in the forward to Void Corporation, there is like specifically really personal stuff about like your mother and dementia and things like that. Do you think that, because you've written a bunch of nonfiction books too, you have the book about insomnia, you have Molly, which came out last year, right? Do you think that the nonfiction can function as like sort of a key to unlock the fiction in some ways, or do you approach from like a more like I guess like the like academic-y way, as like a new critical perspective where the text just completely stands on its own?
Again, the old me would have been like, none of that is meaningful. None of my life is meaningful. And now I just like can't help but deny, I can't help but see parts of my mom's dementia in the character. And I can see what I was hurting about, even though it doesn't necessarily become a plot vehicle, but like I think the term is immersion. Like I like to be immersed in a book. And like, so like, I feel like my books often just drop you into a world and leave you there. And like, I think also in the way that I write, every reader kind of sees different things, when you're dropped into something like that. Mm-hmm. Like, I learn more about the books by hearing what other people say about them, right? Because like they pick up on threads that are laid there with purpose, but I don't think as I'm typing, I always like know exactly how that translates, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I want to, like, we can do a short pivot to, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, because you teach like an online course sometimes, right? Is it specifically about like sort of unconsciously tapping into that sort of thing and writing like through like accessing the subconscious and things like that?
Most of all of my books up until what I'm writing now have been, I sit down and I don't even have anything that I'm starting with. I don't know where I'm beginning, and I don't even know why I'm beginning necessarily. And so I tend to write way more to get into finding out what the book is, and then I can start the book. But like, it changes as I'm inside it. In this, I'm as the author, I'm almost immersed in it just as much as the reader might be, although I'm the one with control. So it's like working a puzzle, and it's kind of like I think of it as like exploring a cave in certain ways, and so the unconscious part is like you don't know what you're going to say, and then you're like reacting to it as it comes out. So like to me, it's very simply language in that way, where it's like write down one sentence and then look at it and then say, well, what sentence comes after that, and then as you start building a scaffolding of sentences, you kind of start to see where you are in the world, if that makes sense. So
it does,
yeah. So it is unconscious in that way. And then like Void Corporation in particular, like I would take that raw material and just revise over and over and over again and look for the things that as a reader that you would take away, even though they weren't obvious to me all the time as a writer. So I'm getting away from that because it turns out to be a lot much more work to write. I must have written Void Corporation literally 50 times over and over again in the same document before I finally ended up on the one that's there.
Yeah. I when I was reading, I wondered a lot about process, and this is like kind of a Paris review-y type question, which like I think can probably be annoying, but
you're elevating our brand.
When you are writing, like I think that a reader can mistake it as something like stream of consciousness, right? Because there is like a movement from sentence to sentence where the connective tissue is not necessarily immediately there for view. But I also think that the editing of it is visible. Like I can tell when reading these books, I can tell that you are sitting down and editing for like at least as much time as you're writing for, right? You're spending a lot of time doing that. So what is that?
Way more time editing. Yeah.
That's what I'd imagine, even though like, I feel like maybe if someone that didn't read, that was not a reader, picked up the book, they would approach it in like the way that like some people approach like expressionist art and just be like, these are just words on a page. Like how do you like, how does that whittling of stuff happen? How do you like take that sculpture of a million words and make it into something much, much smaller?
It's a great question. And like, I think I recently figured out how to explain this better when I was watching YouTube videos about Ornette Coleman and Miles Davis. It was like, why did they change music so much? And it was like, before them, jazz was 12 tone. You could only do certain things, and I kind of think of like plot-based writing that way. If you have a detective on a case, he can't do a lot of things. And I writing for me is freedom. So like, I don't want that. But so what Miles Davis and Ornette Coleman did was develop modular writing, where it's like Miles Davis said, you can't play a wrong note because whatever note you play after what you pay after that will change how you think about what just happened. So as long as you're an artist and you're working within the mode that you've set up, you're creating the ground beneath your feet. And I really do think, like I said, I didn't know anything about things, but I come to, like Void Corporation was literally like a corporation that destroys art. I had that idea in mind, but when I wrote the first sentence, I wasn't like, the corporation stood on XYZ Street, So to take that modular metaphor, it's like I have the idea, I have kind of like, and as I've gotten more refined in my process, I've tried to set up more structure ahead without knowing what's going to fill it, and kind of let it. So it's a mixture of the unconscious and improvisation and like technique and other things. So yeah, and Annex is probably the ultimate form of that for me, because it's like, that pattern could never be repeated. I was almost like letting myself spew into the forms that were there with no barriers at all, not even comprehending what I'm saying half the time, So that's the essence. It's like, set up a structure for yourself that has some body and some other attributes of storytelling, and then the language almost is secondary. And that's kind of how life works, It's like, if you walk into your house, you might pick up a magazine first, you might pick up a knife first. You don't know what you're going to do. And the freedom there is beautiful, but the linearity and the plot kind of emerge in your wake, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I saw something, and again, you can correct me if I'm confusing you with a different writer here, but I think I saw something on Twitter a while ago where someone had posted, it was like, this person's 10 rules for writing. And one of the rules was like, never use a word if you don't know what that word means. And your response to it was something like, no, I don't agree with any of these rules, especially that one. You should just use these words however you feel like using them.
Yeah. I think it was C.S. Lewis or T.S. Eliot or one of that. But yeah, like, I love like, well, a lot of it is sound or rhythm or impulse. And then I'll like, right. Especially now, and especially in Annex, it was like, it seems like the word I want to say is this, or you guys pointed out that it's like, sometimes it seems like the word is picked visually, or like sure. sometimes I'll like think of the word that should become, and then I'm like, well, what's a different word that would do something adjacent? And like that creates a little kink in the sentence where you're like, shit, I was going to say hollow, but now I said hallow. And like that completely, I'm on a different page now, but there is a logical little connector there. You know what I mean? So
yeah, for sure. I think that's something that I like, but also makes it really difficult, is that like when I'm reading a sentence in my head, I get to what I assume the noun is, but then it turns out that the noun is actually like an adjective or something that's describing another thing. I'm just like, no, I didn't like the sentence. Like it keeps going in a way that I'm like, oh, I thought like we were going to like get to the action part of the sentence, but it's like, no, we're still describing. Hold on, we're not there yet. Or like, I wrote down like there's one in UXA where you say it's integral to the integrity of the integration. And I'm just like, I don't know, maybe just like, let's just put a bunch of words that look the same that like make sense, but it's also maybe not a thing that anybody's ever said before. But it's just like, these three words like look cool together. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, sculptural. It's definitely sculptural for me that way sometimes, especially when I get into the more far out things, because like Annex, I was trying to write in a language of the future, like hundreds of years in the future. Yeah. It's like the slang and the idiom of the way people talk cannot look the same in 400 years. That'd be stupid. So like, I think it's like sometimes, especially in that kind of mode, it's like trying to project where words are now over a time span that you haven't lived. So like that's the fun to me, and it's like it's not accurate. Like I'm certainly not looking for accuracy, and that's why mood or vibe or feel is so important over that.
Well, it's what really frustrates me about like sci-fi movies is that like it's like 400 years in the future or something like that, and just like, you know what, nobody's ever written as well as Stephen King. It's like no, like, 400 years since then, like whatever, just like, but like it's trying to ground you in like a, hey, this guy's still around. But it's like no, like there's like some pop star who pivoted to author who like blew everyone's mind. Like just make something up and be like, that's the girl. Like that's just like, no, it's like Stephen King and like Miles Davis. It's just like, no, like those exist in our world. Like I understand like as a frame of reference, but like it might be disorienting, but I also like that you're not afraid to like seemingly confuse or challenge the hell out of your readers. Like, no, you're going to figure it out. Or I think as Bob has said on episodes, like it's sort of self-selecting. Like people might pick up one of your books, for sure, but people are not going to pick up a second of your book unless they're like up for the challenge.
Yeah. And I think every book kind of has a different purpose. And like the funny, we were just talking about how like these two books came out and they were both really old. It's like it takes so long to make an object out of the thing that like, and I just really like writing for like some people write to write a great novel for their audience who will continue to come back. And to me, it's like, I just want to see things that no one else would ever make. And like, I don't really care where they end up in the lineage. And like, that requires some confidence, but it's also like the novel it's called a novel for a reason. And the art form is very young. So the fact that people get latched on to how to do it based on the last 100 years is like, for me as a reader first, like I couldn't be more bored by that approach,
And anytime someone, because like I feel like every 6 months or something, there's like the novel is dead discourse, and it's like, are you guys even reading? Like, there are so many people out there doing cool, weird things that are like that maybe we didn't even think could be a novel. Like there was, we talked with B.R. Yeager about like, I don't know if it was Dennis Cooper, but someone did like a novel that was entirely just GIFs, and it's like like crazy things like that just like you can just create. Just do it. There are no rules for this thing. It's like you were saying, it's it's not like film where you have to have all of these millions of dollars of lighting and gaffers and things like that. It's like, it's literally just you and a notebook. You can do whatever you want. Your brain can go anywhere. It's,
I think what people mean when they say the novel is, or should mean when they say the novel is dead, is that the cultural market around the novel is on its last legs because it's been beaten to death by people trying to replicate the past successes. And like, I 100% agree. I almost think like the novel dying culturally is going to be good for the novel because only people that want to do it because they're looking to invent something or, it's become a dishonest thing that's been co-opted by entertainers and business people,
So, I mean, I saw an incredibly depressing thread on Twitter where it was like novelists, what's your biggest dream? And almost every response was just someone saying like a Netflix series made out of my novel. And it's like, no one is like wants to write novels anymore because that's the thing. That's the end goal is making something cool. It's always like, and I get it. Cause there's like, a lot of, everyone I know that is a professional writer, like does something else too. They like very few people are like financially, completely free unless their thing was adapted into a movie or something like that. So I understand that as like a liberating goal, but
even then though, I think like that's a false goal because like selling your book for a movie rights is not going to set you for life. You're not, like it's still a grind and like it's someone else's grind too. So it seems miserable to me when I see people taking that approach and I'm just like, you're not really a writer. You're more of like a like illusionist or something. You need to, I don't know. I just think it's like a bad career choice to write a book in order to get Netflix to buy it. Like,
because also like just write the screenplay or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Why not just like skip a step and do that? But like going back directly to something you were commenting on with Annex, and I think we see it also in UXA probably more than Void Corp and 300 million. Is this focus on like design and the visual aspect of the words. And if you listen to the Annex episode, then like I talk in that episode a little bit about like I immediately like kind of recognize the Mike Correa like kind of design stuff because I've read his novels and like it's recognizable his visual input there. So like what is that? How much is that something that you're thinking of? Obviously in Annex, it's something that you're thinking about a lot, but how much are you thinking about like the way that the different stuff like actually falls on the page and like different ways to challenge the reader in that manner?
It's a big part. It's a big part visually, especially for specific. I mean, sometimes it's not always a thing. Sometimes I do write traditional prose, but like, I don't know. I think this whole thing of like the reader and the writer having a narrative dream that are separate. That's the old kind of way of thinking. It's like we both know you're reading, so like the book is much more than just sentences, and like you can cause affect and you can do lots of things by changing the way they're built. So like I love fiddling with. I'll sit there and fiddle with little tiny visual elements of a book forever. And if you look, Mike did such a great job translating that from how it was built on the page, because I was like doing it in Word without any premonition of ever publishing it. And it looks as close to what it looks like in the thing as you possibly can. But when I go and open the Word file now, it feels like going through like a ruined site of what shiny building would be built on top of it. Cause it's so, you can't do everything. And like, I don't know, I think like for people that are worried about the novel dying, it's like the page is full of things. And like, we obviously are in a culture that crosses forms. And so like, I just think like, how can you not want to play with font and color and shaping and sizing,
Yeah, he's also a great writer in his own right. His novels are really, really quite good. Something that was like so simple, but like blew my mind a little bit was that there are no page numbers on UXA. And I thought about that specifically because I have like spent time as an academic and I teach at a high school level. And so like, I'm always like MLA. And I'm just like, how would you have made this citation proof? I guess you could cite the scenes individually, but like if you want to go back and quote, or if you want to find something. So it's like forcing the reader into this completely different experience of reading where it's like they actually almost have to physically mutilate the book with like bending the page or something if they want to go back and relocate the thing instead of just like noting or it's most similar than to listening to an audiobook where like if you're listening to an audiobook and you want to note something or reread it, then you have to like, pull over the car and like stop it and be like, okay, it was at this minute. So it like that to me felt like a completely different reading experience, especially because I think a regular experience with reading is like, you're reading a 325 page book. When you're on page 150, you think, here's how much I have left to go. But if you don't have that, then you think completely differently about the spacing of everything. It's a completely new experience.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, it's true. And I think like the body of that book, like I thought of it as an algorithm, like a program to be, that's why there's code throughout it. And so I almost thought of it as like something to be uploaded somewhere, like rather than to be perused. In general, that book to me is not, I never thought anyone would read it cover to cover. And so like it's gratiating that you have. And I think that's one way to get into it, but it's also like a bathroom book sort of. And I think the best way I've compared it is like a religious text that is also a bathroom book.
I think to kind of combine the last couple of questions, like I've noticed that like, because I am lazy and or broken, like I like reading a lot of things on Kindle as opposed to like my poor supple wrist can't like hold the book and turn the pages. Yeah. But a lot of your most recent stuff doesn't seem to be on Kindle. And I'm wondering if, and I sort of get a sense of an answer just by the availability, but like if that's something that you would ever want to translate it from like the text, because like again, like we're talking with Annex, like it is like this art piece thing that like I don't know if that design would translate. Or going back to the earlier question about like these writers' dreams of like adapting, like would you want to see this in any other medium? Like would you want to see like an Annex TV show or a 300 million TV show or something? Or do you like just like the thing is the thing and this is the way that it is?
I think if Annex was to be any other form, it would be like every page installed in a museum. Like I think that they're each kind of designed to be, I think that was my ultimate goal. I had a goal at one point where I was going to write a book that was a one of one object. And I think I thought this was going to be that. Like I said, I didn't really have any hopes of anyone reading it. So it was like, I think of it as a portrait of something like that. Although I am interested in film too, like I did work with a guy who was trying to make 300 million into a film. And it just like, Cronenberg said it best for me on this, where he's like, if you wanted to film Naked Lunch, the film, which he did, but he said, if you really wanted to film Naked Lunch, the film, you would just film the pages of the book, one after the other. And that would be the film. And I was like, it's true. Like that's why other media can't ever top. That's why I think the novel will never truly die, because there is no corollary. You can remake, redo, and every person kind of would bring something different to that. So I think it's like an infinite question. But yeah, I mean, I think those are fun. It's fun to see what you do with something that's unfilmable, and how you go into that.
Because I think with both 300 Million and Void Corp, which we sort of noticed have like similar kind of structures, where it's like 5 different sections of the book, each kind of seems to become a little bit harder to grasp and sort of understand like visually. But like Void Corp, I'm like, okay, here we go. Straightforward. Blake did a book with a plot. Like, here we go. It's just that, you know, we're burning art, we're destroying art. And then all of a sudden just like, oh no, we're like, maybe like she's maybe dead, and looking down. It's like, but we don't know if that's to be true. And so I think there's something funny that when I should have known better. We had just read 2 of your books, but like when I started Void Corp, I was just like, okay, here we go. Straightforward. I'm going to follow it. And like 300 Million starts that way too. Like the first chunk of that feels like a really dark kind of like Project Mayhem from Fight Club, and then all of a sudden becomes this like totally different, ethereal, harder to grasp thing. But I think there's something very funny to me about like a plot fake out where it's you might be able to adapt this, then all of a sudden just like I don't even know like what I'm reading here.
Yeah.
Parentheses complimentary.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like it that way, so that is a compliment. But 300 Million, I did that on purpose. Like I kind of like the idea of tricking someone into the novel, like this is going to be fun, you know, and then when they get in, they're fucking stuck, and that there's maybe it's sadistic or something, but like it does feel like more true of an exchange between reader and writer to me than I am the grand story master and let me spin a yarn for you. Yeah, let's go exploring. Let's jump in this hole and see where we land. You know?
There is because we were just talking about the movies and stuff. In like a lot of these, there is this like heavy presence of other art forms. Obviously, in Void Corp, it's like paintings and like quote unquote fine art, and then UXA obviously there's film, and then there's like there's also the AI television show that goes on for forever. And in 300 Million, there's like the music, the bands that like create music. And then when you listen to the tapes, there's no music actually on them. So you are like sort of channeling these other mediums through this medium. So like you are, how can I ask this question? How can I make this statement into a question is like what everyone at every Q&A has to say. It feels like you're engaging all the senses through like what people understand of other art forms, but doing it through the novel. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm trying to make a question out of it, but I can't.
Those are often fuel for me. So like a lot of those books were written with like the same record playing over and over again, and kind of like it's almost like ekphrastic at times where I'm like listening to a certain kind of music and then trying to transcribe the textual equivalent of that, selected for a certain reason, you know, I mean, UXA is basically entirely taken from a treatment for a film that I was like, oh, that he meant for this to be made visually, but I'm going to make it in text because that's not only is that my thing, but it's like, what does it mean to write a movie? What does it mean? You know, in the same way that Cronenberg says that you could film a book and that would be the right way to shoot a book. Like, what about writing a movie? You know? And so like, I don't know. I think that like, again, the format of a novel gives you so much freedom to bring all these different kinds of styles and ideas in that like just can't happen. You know, you can only do so much in a movie. There's something on screen and there's something you're hearing and like, there's dialogue, but like,
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's fun to try to describe music. Music, it defies description, and you know.
Yeah, it sure does. There was something that I thought of based on, I guess it's like kind of in the introductory section of UXA where you say like it's like imagine this as like a film watched through someone like wearing a helmet being forced to see it through like
before they go to work at what the America that still exists. Yeah.
For some reason, that immediately made me think of the film Begotten. Do you know Begotten?
Yeah, I do.
And so like and
I was
black
and white horror from the 80s, like 89.
I don't know if it's the 80s, but it's Elias Merhinge.
But the thing that looks like it's from 100 years old.
The guy that did Shadow of the Vampire later on. But like so I had that film in my head aesthetically informing the entirety of my reading of that book. It was weird how I couldn't shake that. They felt like almost like sister texts to me in some way, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, like the thing that's in common there for me is, well, I don't know, Begotten kind of shows the monster, but there's something about the horror I haven't seen Begotten in a long time, but Megan often does an impression of it where she pretends to stab her crotch with a knife. And I'm like, yeah, I want my book to be like stabbing my crotch. So I don't know, it's like there is something. I think my stuff often gets compared to horror a lot, and I like that because I think I feel like horror movies are more like more realistic than realism at this point. At least when I watch a horror movie, I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize that. Whereas when I watch a realistic movie, I'm like, this doesn't seem real. So like, and I mentioned the affect before of trying to use affect, and these are all things that people use to like say bad art, like you shouldn't. Horror is a lower form of art, and I just don't think it's true. And I think I like to exist in this space like Begotten, where there are no limits. That you can do whatever you want when you have that kind of a story to tell.
Yeah, there's definitely like a more visceral reaction to it than there is toward realism. And I'm okay. Like I like realism stuff. I have made the argument on this podcast many times in favor of a kind of boredom. Yeah. Like the sort of like flat affect of like the grind as being like an aesthetic choice. I think that works really well. But there is something in each of your books that is, and maybe this is why it reminds me of Begotten, but there is something that where it's like the pulp of intestines or the grime of someone's like bone shards attached to pieces of brain that just like it makes you there's a discomfort almost as a theme throughout all of your work.
It makes you feel yucky.
It makes me feel yucky.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because like 300 million in particular, like I wanted you to feel yucky. I wanted people that read it to feel as sick as they should feel when presented with that material. And like, it's something that, horror is, when it's not Begotten level horror, it's like made sexy or it's made, right. It's made narrative in ways that are fake. And there's a resolution for that everything comes out okay. And it's like, I think if the novel has anything to say now, it is that it can reflect the world and the way things are without feeling like it's just exploiting it. Like when I watch a movie that is gore for the fun of it being gore, I'm like, what are you actually doing here? You're taking people's horror and anguish and making it into a product. The person that wrote a lot of those books was very angry and didn't know what to do about it. And like, rather than do violence or hurt or like take it out on myself in some way or take it out on others in some way, I made art that could show this is how people feel in reality when it looks like everything's okay. So that's the honest part of it to me, that like, I think it's easy to confuse violence and fun language, like messy, spazzy language, with a lack of care. And it actually comes from the exact opposite space.
Yeah, I agree. That's really, really well said.
Well, it's something that like we talked about, I think maybe in one of the books this season, but also when we talked about, Megan's live blog or Darcy's like, literally show me a healthy person. It's like what Bob was saying earlier, that it looks easy to do or looks careless, looks like anybody can do, but like you can't, like there's something that each of those shows the refinement and the craft and like the actual commitment to the thing that I think by being as good at it as the three of you are in what you're doing, it makes it look easy.
Yeah, and the guts of just being open and honest about it, which is like, half the game, right? Just being like, here's the actual feeling. I'm doing the uncomfortable thing of like showing you how I actually feel about this thing. And then the aesthetic craft of it like might come after that. But just being the type of person that will be open about that stuff and willing to like put it out there is, I think that's like, yeah, that's half the game, I think.
I agree very much. And I think that people that don't do that do have the goal of like, I want my movie to be Netflix, they think that like any success gained outside of the normal path is cheating or bullshit in some way. And it's like, it's funny when someone makes it look easy and then you try to do it and you realize how much is actually going into it. And why would you want to do that? It's not going to sustain your life. It's not going to probably make you any friends. But like, to me, it's the place where I feel that I'm the most real and I'm the most in touch with whatever exists beyond it all. So like, it feels most honest to me. Whereas the what other people think is the most honest of like, I want to be a famous writer. It's like that's the dishonest thing, but like the world we live in doesn't facilitate my point of view very often.
So going back to, I didn't think to ask you this question until we just started talking about it, but like you have also been live blogging. Have you enjoyed that? Is it an enjoyable thing to do?
I love it. I think it's fun. Again, Megan makes it look really easy, and it's a different. I've never been, despite having written about personal things. Like I hate talking about myself, and I hate writing about myself. But like I find that it's different. It fulfills in a similar way. It almost kind of reveals to me that the magic of my fiction, where I think I'm not doing that, is why I love that so much more, because it is a lot harder to pick and choose what to say about what you did in your day. But at the same time, it looks very easy to say, I ate this, I did that. But like, and I've seen people try to live blog and it's really boring and really stupid because, it's like, it's not just a matter of like type everything that happened. There's as much or more artifice in that. So,
well, I think that's something that like in live blog too, like it was interesting to see, and this isn't like about her, even though she's wonderful and we all love your wife, but it was interesting to see like Megan like sort of grapple with like what live blog 2 would be, having done the first one and being like, is this a commentary on that? Because like her life is so different and so much, for lack of a better word, like more normal than the chaos of the first one. Like, when you're saying like, what do you include? What do you not include? Like, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, it is. And like, it's also when you realize that like a lot of people were showing up because they wanted to see you in pain, or like, it's you only liked me when I was addicted to drugs and about to kill myself. Like,
right.
Fuck you. And so like, that's difficult to overcome. And like, I think a lot of people don't want to come anywhere near having to think that way about themselves and others. And so it is daunting. And like, it also is like not something you can't learn without doing, I think that's a hard-earned lesson. I learned it really hard with my memoir about my previous wife dying. Like I went into that with the full faith that people would not open that book without trusting me as a voice and believing me. And it was just like not the case. And it's been a really hard, it was the case with like certain readers and like the loud, but like the critical forum and the online, it's like, those people will be mean and they'll come with the worst reasons. And like, you have to really want to do it. You have to really like, people have asked me like, are you glad that you wrote the book after that happened? And I'm like, I'm glad the book exists, but like, would I ever do that again? I really don't know I'll ever make myself that vulnerable again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope this goes without saying, but, fuck those people and they can eat shit.
Yeah.
'Cause you can do what you want.
It goes with saying, like, let's say it more often.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So let's pivot away from those assholes. But I want to go like, so I'm curious kind of about UXA, if it always existed in this scene by scene description, because it feels like, the similarities between 300 million and Void Corporation aside, each of these things has been so different. Live blog is a different thing. Like, do you set out with like a specific, like for UXA specifically, or for anything you're approaching, do you set out with a thing to write in a certain style, or do you see like where the story takes you? And like specifically UXA, was it always scene by scene, or was it a more quote unquote like conventional format that then became what we read?
So to the style question, it's like, I kind of like, I think the style comes out of who I am at the time, like but what I've been reading, what I've been consuming, how I am. And like, that's why I liked writing those first fast drafts, because it's like, if it takes you 10 years to write a book, like you're so many different people throughout that time. Right. And so a lot of those early books were like, let me bust this out a draft and then play with it as an editor and a reader. And so style emerges in kind of discovering what came out of that sort of. With UXA, it was always the list of images, because I had that source file that was literally just a list of images. And so, but I was doing it kind of out. I wasn't like, I'm going to write a book that does this. I was like, let's just see what happens when I try to take these prompts and write them. And like, I had a finished version of that done 10 years ago, but I like when I'd come back to it, it didn't have the full feeling of a book to it. I even showed it to a couple people and they were like, yeah, it doesn't really like it doesn't do that much. But so like, I just like couldn't get away from it. So over time, some seeds would be scraped out and replaced, or some would be revised over. So like the style kind of emerged bit by bit, and also kind of like, I think also too, like once, you know, it's kind of like building a tower. When you like remove one piece and put it somewhere else, like the whole shape of the tower changes. So that's why revision like can be really hard, especially when the content is your life. Like doing that process with writing a memoir about my wife dying was way harder, because it was like, I can't just move these pieces around willy-nilly. Like it's trying to reflect life. So it really doesn't, it mostly emerges from over the life of the creation time. But I think that it's like a big bang with the original draft, and then like trying to come back and like make sense and both stylistic sense and literary sense of like, what is this doing and how can it do it better? You know, like it's, oh, I laid this little egg right here, but like there's more to say to make that actually click. And like, and sometimes you find those things and you're like, I don't want this one to click. I want people to have to figure it out or not get it. And other times you're like, oh, this is so integral to other things that it should really be. Sometimes I just like come back and I'm like, erase what you wrote and write and try to describe what you actually just wrote to someone, like literally, you know, and like that can be a nice way to find what you're actually doing, you know?
That sounds terrifying to me.
So
the idea of like writing something and then losing it and then being like, let me rewrite that thing that I just wrote sounds, and I know like, cause I've had, you know, like 15-year-old students doing this in writing class where they like lose a document and they're just like, but how can I write the thing that I just like they see that as a more impossible task than writing something completely fresh.
I had to do that in college. Like I had to write a screenplay, or I'd write like 50 or 60 pages of a screenplay for a final, and the computer I was using just completely died. And I was like, oh, I don't have that back, because this is like before like Dropbox, like before Cloud or anything. I was just like, what do I do? And like the second version was both like freeing, because I'm just like, well, I already know like what I want to say.
Yeah.
And also a little freeing, because I'm just like, I also kind of don't give a shit right now, because I'm just like, I already did it and like that's gone. But like it was good and bad, I think.
But there's got to be the terror of going like, I'm never gonna like recreate the magic of this phrasing that I really liked or something like that.
It's definitely like the most recent time this happened to me was because I had written this part that I've been gearing up to hit for a long time, and I did it, and it was only really like one page. And when I came back the next day, it was gone because Dropbox had like recursed the version or something. I ended up writing 50 pages of prose to try to replace that one page, and I still don't like it as much as the one page. Sometimes it's funny because I'll come down from a day of writing stuff, and Megan will be like, "Oh, what were you working on today?" And I'll say it to her, and I'll say it really simply, and I'll go back and look what's on the page, and I'll be like, or she'll read it and be like, "Why don't you like this? Isn't it? That's not what you said happened." And I'm like, sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. Or it can also consolidate some energy for you. So like sometimes I'll write something and like I had an idea in mind and it came out way different, but like I can skip past that, and like now I know where I am. Like I know what that was supposed to be, whether it was or not, to the reader in that same modular. Like I didn't quite transmit the idea that I was intending to, but the idea is contained there. So now where do I go? You know?
Yeah.
How much of like what's not on the page do you share with Megan? Like, I'm sure like living with another writer is maybe both good and bad. Like it's, you know, you're like, well, no, this is what I wrote. And she's like, no, it's not. But like, so like, that's like, I think probably good and bad, but like, does she get like addition or anybody, you know, editors or whoever, like, do you share additional context of like what you are trying to say on the page, or are you just like, no, this is what it is? Like, I'm curious because it's so hard to like, as you know, it's like hard to talk about your work outside or like sort of past mood and vibe, like we were talking about before. Like, are you providing additional context of like what you're trying to convey, or are you just trusting in like what you've put on the page?
Good question. Yeah, in the past, I've never shown anyone anything until it's all the way done, because I'm afraid, because that is a fragile space. And when you're trying to say it in other words, you can really fuck it up. So like, I'll sometimes tell Megan, but I'm kind of careful about how I do that. But and this is crucial to the drafting part, I take notes to myself as I'm going. So like, I'll be writing something and I'll be like, don't forget to conclude this later. Yeah. So like I end up by the end having like scads of pages of like things that you might be able to go back with as a map and use as sense. Mm-hmm. But that to me is like that's scaffolding and it needs to be burned. And like the least I can show that to anyone, because in the end, the book's not going to be what I intend it to be when I'm sculpting this way. It's like, right. you make a sculpture of something. It's like, you may have to tell someone what you were trying to make, but it still looks like whatever it is. So, it's almost like don't talk to the pitcher while and I've said this to Megan before, like, don't talk to the pitcher when he's in a no-no, like mm-hmm. let him go. And like, all that to say, I'm trying to get a little more open and being like, in the past, I've been I will not say a word. And now I'm like, it does help to bring a little other air in when you know that you're doing it,
Right.
I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier about like the people who take like 10 years to write a book and then they change they're different people over that time. But I think over these 4 books, which probably occupy a 10-year space of your life, right? If not more than that. There are like, I think you can trace like direct imagery, right? That seems to affect you over and over again, right? There is a consistent thematic idea about mirrors being placed throughout, which I like maybe tried to like go overly academic on, describing it as like the Lacanian mirror stage where the child creates the subject and object because they don't yet have language to do so. I don't know if that's accurate at all.
I like that. It wasn't on my mind when I wrote it, but I liked what you said about that. Yeah.
It makes me feel smarter when reading, when I can put together things like that. So, and then the second thing, which I think is further than imagery, and I want to know like why this is such an interesting thing that you keep on coming back to, is this the idea of like ideas or ideologies being almost viral in like a mimetic way, like because we have that, like that is what's going on in Void Corporation a lot, right? Because you have this idea of people see these paintings and then you start having these copycats. That's what's going on in 300 million. You have people who are like virally exposed to this madman, and so what is it about that as a theme that seems to like travel over multiple novels for you?
Also, a third one you don't have to comment on, just a lot of jizz. I've seen the word jizz more in your books than I've seen in any other book ever.
Damn. All right, I'll take that one. Yeah.
Maybe I should be reading different books.
It's a good question. It's like, I think the common element is America to some degree. Like all the other books I see that are about America, like don't capture America to me. And I'm really like, if there's anything that I've been able to come away with, like all these books kind of do occupy like a 10-year, 12 years, 15-year span. And I feel like a different person than that now, even though I'm still obsessed with similar things. I think it's something about living in America. I think it's about trying to both document the feeling of living in America while also looking for an out and like some reason to not be consumed by the morass. Because America feels like a viral illness to me, on its own in a way. And I'm afraid of living in a culture where we look back and no one had, like there's no honest record that cuts past all the illusions and all the yearning to be a part of Netflix and all this stuff and just like throws you in it. And that's it's an impossible task. It's to describe a country through hundreds of years, but like I like impossible tasks. So I don't know. I guess that's as close as I can come to that. Also trying to have a spiritual life amidst that doesn't fall prey to the corporate mindset and the brainwashing and all the shit that comes with anything spiritual in the world for the most part. Like something greater still exists within this rubble, I believe. Like, and maybe that's to my detriment. But I don't know.
How much of an like online person are you? Because you're like around what you're like late 30s, early 40s, right?
I'm 45.
45. Okay. So how
you look great for 45.
Oh, thank you.
How much of an, because you grew up in the age when we like all turned from being a society that was not terminally online to being a group of people that are terminally online, and that must have affected the way that you see this sort of virality of ideology and things like that, right?
Yeah. I think, yeah. So I was always a big computer dork when I was a little kid, and I didn't get the internet until I was like 18 or so. So I've matured in a time where like I was getting on BBSs and I was playing computer games and like explore like coding and stuff, but like the corporate thing that would take over the internet and kind of like eradicate all of the creative power that it had. I became an adult during that time. So I'm like, I remember the unlimited power that it seemed like something like the internet had when it first came out. And like, to me, I always connected to Inspector Gadget, Inspector Gadget, the little girl Penny who has that computer book that she can like control all kinds of shit with. I was always like, that's the coolest book. And like, so I think like a lot of my writing has been trying to make a simulacrum of that in some way. And like, I find it really depressing that money and corporations have slowly, bit by bit, taken away all the creative power and use it as a site to turn everyone against each other. And it like really, like I met my wife on the internet. All my best friends are from the internet. Like it was a beautiful thing. And it really has been, it's really turned into a weapon. And I remember how people were before that. And I know that people aren't the problem. And I know that like, we have to find a way out of the trap that's been built for us. So like, I guess that's why so much of the books are about escaping this like mega structure that's trying to envelop everyone. And like, I don't think we're going to get there by ignoring that,
I agree. Yeah, for sure.
One thing we like to ask authors that we have on is usually you're the first author that we've done an entire season about the book. So you're breaking new ground for us. We're breaking new ground with your work. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
But a lot of every other season of the show has been themed around a particular theme or group or focus or whatever. And so we like to ask authors to like build a module around like similar books or whatever. But we're going to ask you a different kind of question. What author do you think would be similarly rewarding or interesting to dissect and analyze and read through in the way that we did your book? Like another contemporary author who's got a handful of work that we don't necessarily read everything they've done.
Hopefully someone that we can actually talk to.
Yeah. So someone that you think would be interesting to read 4, 5, 6, whatever books of that, you find interesting, you find compelling, that you think would be like a for lack of a better word, going back, a vibe fit or whatever. Like, is there a particular author, writing today that you think would work for our format in a way that we are doing your texts?
I mean, the immediate person I think of is Dennis Cooper, who you mentioned earlier with Jaeger. Dennis has been up those streets longer than anybody, and every book he puts out comes at it in a different way. So I could see a great module of however many books you wanted to do that would have tons of, I mean, if you're trying to stay in the grotesque camp anyway.
Has he been of particular influence to you?
Oh yeah. I found him early, and I thought, his book, The Marbled Swarm, was one of the biggest influences on 300 Million, especially the first part that you're talking about. He just invents his own forms and moves on to the next one, and kind of has done so at the background of culture for a long time. And he's the other person. It's him and Brian Evanson, who would also be a great person to do a module on, who has countless books. Those are my two, the guys that like, when I read them, I was both enthralled as a reader and like, I didn't know you could do this.
Yeah.
And each time. Cool. Yeah.
You know what I thought about a little bit when I was reading 300 Million, and you can feel free to go about this because it is a disgusting book, is Cows by Matthew Stokefield.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know that book?
Yeah, Matt Stocco. Yeah,
Stocco, yeah.
Yeah, Cows.
That book is like, there's so much stuff in that book where I'm like, and now he's eating the shit. Come on. What's going on here?
the meat farm factory stuff like that. I'll never forget that book.
Yeah. So I mean, some of the stuff in 300 million where you're specifically like the viscera and like the more like brutal stuff. It like flashed me back to those moments.
Nice. Yeah. No, he's great. Yeah. I think he's a Dennis person too. Dennis has a lot of people like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and Yeager's like that too. I think he's got a lot of like his tentacles are out there in the world for a lot of like writers of your generation that are doing like transgressive kind of things for sure.
We have a couple questions that we ask every author that I'm going to get to in a second, but we asked Megan when she was on for some stone cold NBA locks, and she said bet on the Hawks, which has not done well for us.
Don't do that. No, that was not right.
So this episode's going to come out in a couple of weeks. It's going to come out in the middle of January. Look, this is not professional gambling advice. Don't listen to us, but what's your stone cold NBA locks? We've only asked Megan and you. We're never going to ask anybody else. This is just a Boyle Butler household. Stone cold NBA locks. I'm
going to come back to the Hawks because like when she said it, they were really struggling. And I think that they're like emerging this year. I don't want to say bet. NBA is really hard to bet on. All of the betting I've done has been tennis. So I don't even really know my locks on tennis. I used to bet a lot on, do a lot of betting on tennis. Yeah. But,
wow.
I'm going to go with the Hawks just to back up. You know, like, okay. I think you might want to double dip and like come back and I think that they're a sleeper team for the future anyway.
Well, they're a weird team because I remember like in the beginning of the season it was like, oh, only team that has beaten the Cavs, only team that has lost to the Wizards. What's going on here?
Yeah, they're young, but I don't know. Maybe next season start betting on the Hawks. I don't know. I think
and there is like the perpetual. I mean, it's starting up again because trade deadline's coming, but there's the perpetual Trae Young to the Lakers talk going on right now, which
I don't want them
I'm hoping
to do
doesn't happen. Yeah.
Another thing we talked to Megan about was, and I don't remember how it came up, but we have a thing called the Quadrant where there's 4 like fast casual restaurants situated near each other in Toms River that we all hit in a row. We have a date for the new Quadrant, so let her know that we are doing it again. She should be happy. February 1st, we are doing the Quadrant again. But when we told her, we mentioned this again when we saw her at your book reading, and she said to us, make sure to ask you about your buffet stories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she wants to know the buffet team.
One day, me and 3 friends went to Denny's and stayed there from open to close, eating continuously the whole time to see how much we could eat under an all-you-can-eat price, to see if they would kick us out. Redefining all you could eat was what we were trying to do. And we ate like 157 plates of food or something like that.
Oh my God. And they didn't kick you out.
They were like, they wanted to call the news. They were like, the news should come do a story. They were like made friends of us. They liked us a lot. So they weren't trying to get rid of us. But
did you guys throw them like serious tip money at the end? That's how you gotta. Yeah,
we took care of them. We also threw up a few times, I think. But
you're like cycling outside to puke so that you can come back in and eat more.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
I'm trying to find there was a woman who wrote for like a BuzzFeed or a Gizmodo or something several years ago who I think did like an endless apps at TGI Fridays, like the same kind of thing when she wrote about like can I actually do endless, like are you serious about the endless apps? And like she wrote about it, it was very. I think she also maybe did it like on New Year's Eve. I don't remember that might not be right, but I do like the boundary pushing. Is really all you can eat, truly all you can eat. 157 plates, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's like, isn't there, there's a scene in Monty Python that's like that. And there's the guy in David Foster Wallace's first novel, Broom in the System, that like just keeps eating.
Oh, yeah.
He's like growing and growing and growing and just like eating steak over and over again. And there's something very frightening about that guy. Just
I think that's where my original conceit of body horror came from as a fat middle schooler and elementary schooler. Is I've never forgotten how it felt to like bring it. I want to consume the entire world, you know? Like, I want to eat everything.
Unending appetites.
So I found, it was in Gawker 10 years ago. Katie Weaver said, my 14-hour search for the end of TGI Fridays endless appetizer. So I do like that you are carrying the tradition. I think I might have said this to Megan when she mentioned, or I said this to somebody recently, but at my college, there was like a breakfast price and a lunch price, or a lunch and a dinner price. And it was always like you would get in for the earlier price, which was cheaper, and then just stay through the next meal. So it wasn't to the extent that you did it, but there's still a little bit of gamesmanship where it's like they know what's going on, but they can't do anything about it.
Right. I dare you to take my food away. I'm not full yet.
The last thing is, I think for your episode so far, we have somehow locked on to as exit music, kind of early 2000s, sort of not quite new metal, but I think there was maybe a System of a Down song and a Marilyn Manson song, and maybe
well, the third one was the Pixie song because
third one was Pixie because of slicing the eyeballs. I'm always trying to get Joey to have Dragula be the exit music.
We've used it more than once.
But do you have any exit music that you'd like to have?
Because we play fast and loose with copyright, so
nice.
I think the only one that we've ever had requested that we had to take out, I think a Neil Young song, YouTube or Spotify was just like, you can't use, like, this is he's so litigious. They're like, this is a copyright. We got to take this down.
Yeah.
So what's your exit music here?
Shit. Does it have to
Any
be
song in the
new
world?
metal?
No. Maybe anything you want.
How about Dick to Mouth Resuscitation by Agoraphobic Nosebleed?
Okay, sure.
Yeah. That works. So but based on that answer, I assume that you're not put off by our associating the metal stuff with your with your work.
I love metal.
All right.
It like started as a joke and then he just kept recommending. I'm like, okay,
no, because
sure.
it feels. I feel like there is something aesthetically. I mean, we've talked about this before. There's like something about 1999 pre 9/11 that is like the angriest thing in the world, even though at the time in America, it felt like there wasn't all that much to be angry about. There's just sort of this like free floating angst and like meanness going on with things like, like the rise of Eminem and Limp Bizkit and all of this stuff.
And all of Woodstock 99.
Like I've never been able to put my finger on, but I feel like your work also sort of encapsulates some, not to compare you to Limp Bizkit. That sounds insane.
No, I like it. I like what you're getting at. I think there is some kind of like uncharted rage that was like baked underneath all that stuff, and like now it's been festering and it's like getting shellacked over by different things, and like God knows what it's turning into down there. So we should listen to nasty music.
Yeah. So Agoraphobic Nosebleed.
Yes, please.
Okay,
I got it.
I love it. I think that's all for us here.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Blake. This has been wonderful.
Hey. Thanks to you guys for all the thought and attention. It's really gratifying, and it was nice talking to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that whenever you have something new come out, we'll probably pick it up and talk about it again. So we may be reaching out to talk more in the future.
And also from your book reading, like shout out to Powerhouse Books, because my fiance is like, that's the coolest bookstore I've ever been in. Like she really wants to go back there and just explore when it's like hours are open. So nice little combo there.
Yeah, for sure. Great bookstore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you, Blake.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
I wanna fuck your face. I wanna rub my dick. I wanna choke you.